You're watching Captains, and I'm chatting to Marc Wainer, Executive Chairman of Redefine. Marc, thanks very much for your time. The pleasure I've had in reading your book is enormous. I know you were published in November, and I'm sure you've received a very positive response all around.
It's been surprising because I started off self-published, so we printed 1,000 books, and I thought we'd sell a few hundred, and those sold out by the end of November, so we had to do a reprint. And I was told yesterday we have to do another reprint, which sounds good, and I'm very happy and I'm proud, but from an economic point of view, it's a disaster because I think I get back 30 or 40 rand a book and it costs over 200 to publish. So the more we sell, the more I lose.
I was very excited to see that there's a principle by which I live my life, and there are many lessons in this book, but one of those is the quote from George Bernard Shaw, and that is that success is not about never making mistakes, but it is about never making the same mistake twice.
As I say, it's you pay school fees. No matter how experienced or how good you think you are, you're going to make mistakes. Just put it behind you, learn from it. It's school fees, don't pay the same school fees twice.
Yeah, I want to go back to when you were 20, and we'll probably delve into your childhood later in the conversation. But in your early 20s, your parents lost their family store, and that was teddy bears. This was a life-changing time for your family. Your parents lost their independence. Your father at this time had to go back and work in Dion's. Your mother had to go and work at the Wimpy. And although you were fine personally, you were very worried about your family's finances over this time. Take me back.
Yeah, well, you know, I'd grown up not affluent, but in a typical middle-class kind of environment. We lived in a relatively small house. We didn't have a swimming pool, but we always had food on the table. We were in the supermarket business. And I never thought, you know, my parents had worked for 25 years in this business. They'd sell the business. They would take it easy, and my brother and I would go and do whatever we had to do. So when they lost the business and to a fraudster and the rest of it, and I saw my father at age 60 odd having to go and work as a storeman, my mother working in a hamburger place, it had a huge impact because I suddenly realized, you know, nothing's forever, nothing's cast in concrete. I didn't understand this. You know, to me it was you work, you get rewarded, and you go and retire or play bowls or whatever it was they want to do, and suddenly our lives were turned upside down. I was married, had one child, and suddenly, you know, you've got to find a job, you've got to put food on the table. Things I took for granted were no longer there. Plus, as a family, we had to pay off debt. So this was, it had a huge impact on me.
The next step was to go and look for a job from your side. You applied for a job at Kempton City as a manager, and the lesson there was amazing. And you refer over and over again in the book to kicking the bricks. You know, we always talk about the investment industry. They kick the tires of the company before they invest in it. And from your side, it was about kicking the bricks. And that came from that experience when you applied for that job. There were 9 or 8 candidates, and you were the only candidate who had been to see Kempton City.
Surprisingly, yes.
Before the interview.
Well, first of all, I was living in Randburg. I didn't know where Kempton Park was. So first of all, I had to go and look at it because I wanted to know how to get there if I did get the job. And we only had one car. So I had to hitchhike or whatever to get there until I could afford another car. But and when I was there, obviously looked around. So when I had the interview and they asked me specific, I was able to answer because I was the only candidate who had been to the centre.
And the way you proved that is you said that it was a meat
it's a
restaurant,
steakhouse, yeah.
Camelot,
yes, and
had shoddy windows, and you said you would get that guy to upgrade his windows.
Upgrade his windows and things, and they looked at me in total shock and surprise. So fortunately, that was the start of my property career.
And what a property career it's been. Now, the one thing that I'm going to do in the next half an hour is certainly, by the end of it, get a good grasp on how to deal make, because we can't be sitting with one of the top deal makers in the country and not come out with very concrete tips on what we need to do in this arena.
You know, I think the property industry, it's a little bit of everything. It's marketing, it's finance, it's promotions, it encompasses everything. You don't know, there's no routine. You come to work in the morning, what's going to happen? And is there a problem? How can you solve it? What can you do? So every day is different. It's not routine. And I think that's why I really love it.
Talking about solving problems, you are known for your mathematical acumen and that you can do the most complicated sums in your head.
That's surprising because, and I tell my grandkids this, that when I was at school, from grade 1 to Form 4, when I went to college, I couldn't do maths. I can still remember the names of the extra maths teachers that I had, arithmetic, maths. I could not do it. When I went into matric, they told me, give up maths, do bookkeeping. I could not do it. And it's an indictment, and even today, of our education system, that people are taught by rote, no practical application. When I got into property and I had to measure plans, suddenly half base times height, measuring a triangle, made sense.
From the shopping centre management position, quickly fast-track through.
So from the shopping centre manager, where I did things that I thought were just normal, sort of my supermarket training, charge for water and various things. The boss arrived one day and said, find a replacement for yourself. I thought I was fired. And
you weren't fired. I want to bring that to everyone's attention.
No.
What had actually happened is that you had created such a brand for yourself, and the lesson there that you refer to is create relationships. You spent time going to visit the tenants, finding out what their issues were. And that's what he recognized in you.
Correct. He took me to head office to do what I'd been doing at Kempton City and improving the returns. And about a year or 18 months later, that company got into difficulty. It was bad times. The bank pulled the plug. The company closed down. And 3 guys and myself went to the bank, who is now the owner, and said, well, now you've got all these properties. Who's going to manage them? So they said, okay, you guys set up a business, which we did, which was our first property management business.
City Plan.
City Plan. So you've done your homework.
I have. I've read your book. I told you I enjoyed it.
So from City Plan, we had one client. We had to buy or build our business, which was very hard. It's like getting people to change their bank. So we built that business over a number of years, and we bought a business, and that business, again, was another lesson for us because it was Mayfair Estate. It was riddled with frauds and things that nearly put us out of business. But we came right. We built what became very quickly a very sizable property management business, which we then sold to iCooper, and we started City Plan, which moved out of property management into sectional title conversions and property syndications. We sold part of that business to what was then Metboard. Metboard merged with Investec. Investec bought out my partner. One partner went to Australia. I was left. Investec bought me out. I went to work for Investec, started the Investec Property Group. After 5 or 6 years, the bureaucracy got to me, had my first aneurysm, and...
Pause.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Investec first, because again, you learned a number of lessons from Investec, and I think one of the key lessons learned there from your perspective was that you need to hire people in a certain skill set and you keep them in that skill set. So
Absolutely.
Experts.
Absolutely. And what I learned very quickly was 2 things. I should have started my career maybe working for an institution because I saw the other side. If you want to lend money, I used to think the banks were doing me a favor. This is their business. This is how they make money. And the people. So even when they had a freeze on headcount, let's say freeze on headcount, no one's allowed to employ, somebody good would really come along and they would employ them after a whole long process. I think good people pay for themselves.
And you say that over and over again in the book. In fact, I think it's a lesson that people really need to understand. Is that, and it's not only at a senior level, Mark, you also talk about people
always.
at a junior level.
In Redefine, I always say to our people, hire the best people that you can. So your receptionist should be able to move up. So always, if you can get people who are, in a sense, overqualified for what you're looking, they'll have a career path.
Chatting to Marc Wainer, Executive Chairman of Redefine, otherwise known as South Africa's property guru. You're watching Captains, and I'm chatting to Marc Wainer, Executive Chairman of Redefine. Let's go now to your health and to the aneurysm that you wanted to gloss over in the last 15 minutes that we've been chatting. What happened? And it must, can I assume, stress had a large part
I think
to play
so.
in this?
We actually joke about it now, but I always had this thing in my head. My paternal grandfather died very young, and I was convinced I would be dead by 40. So I arrived 40 and I was still alive, surprise. But at 41, I was due to fly to Cape Town. I was at Investec, and I had these terrible stomach pains. So I thought I had an ulcer. The doctor was standing on the first floor, and I went into his office, and he said to me, well, you haven't got an ulcer, you've got an aneurysm. I said, that's good. I didn't know what an aneurysm was. I said, no, it's not good. You've got this massive aneurysm. I'm surprised it hasn't burst, aortic aneurysm, and you're having surgery now, tonight. They operated that night. It was a 7-hour op. And I joke about it to my wife because as they were wheeling me into theatre, they told us it's a serious op. And she said to me, have you ever been unfaithful? I said, I might survive. So I never answered that question. So that was a bit of a wake-up call. And after that,
Did it change you fundamentally?
At the time, okay, you know, straight afterwards it changed you. But I think long term it changed me as well because this was close. And I then decided back to the Investec scenario, I wasn't going to live with the stress and all the pressures of this big,
the bureaucracy that you referred to.
And the bureaucracy. Yeah. Marc Wainer and Associates, and then that was 98. 98, you'll recall, we had interest rates at 25%. I was doing syndication, signing for the mortgages. So every month I was getting closer and closer to going bust. And I ended up at Corp Capital, started Redefine.
Touch on Wolf Sessman.
Wolf Sessman is somebody I was friendly with for 30 odd years. He was going to be original partner in Cityplan. When I started Redefine, he was going to leave Liberty. He joined me. We had a wonderful relationship. We built things together. And then we had a big difference of opinion over an employee who I thought was not as competent as he thought. And that blew up into a whole scenario and basically came down to either the employee or me, and the board decided that it would be me, and he resigned. And unfortunate.
You make the one comment in the book about keep your ego in check because that can destroy relationships. Did that weigh in on this situation?
I don't know if it was ego, but certainly something, and I don't know what, where probably ego or something, but at the end of the day it was his way or no way, and you know, I tried various compromises, but that's how it went. And you know, at the end of the day, it's funny because somehow things always work out. So I had Wolf as my sweeper, who was doing very nicely and sort of behind the deals. Then employed Andrew Koenig as an FD, and that's just been absolutely fantastic for me. Andrew is wonderful. After 3.5 years, I was able to say, you be the CEO, I'm going to move up and do what I enjoy. I don't have to do the day-to-day stuff. Andrew does it fantastically, and he is the perfect CEO for Redefine.
Marc, the other thing that you focused on in the book is the relationship between a tenant and a landlord, and that it's not necessarily all about collecting the rent at any cost. Can you give me a little more color around that?
No, I think historically the landlord is somewhere between the receiver of revenue and a used car salesman in terms of perception, and it's something which I understand, okay, because it's a grudge purchase, you've got to pay, but we're in partnership. We can have the most beautiful building. If we don't have tenants, it doesn't have a value. So we need the tenant, and the tenant needs us. So we need to have a relationship where we're not the big bad wolf, where we're there. Now, you can't always be, when we came up with our slogan, we're not landlords, we're people, a lot of our staff said, oh, well, now the tenants are going to expect everything for nothing. That's not what we're saying. We're saying you'll get a fair deal from us.
Let's talk about Fountainhead and the arm wrestling you had to do over that deal. I obviously had the pleasure of interviewing you at that time and was up to date as the deal was unfolding, which made for good television for us, Marc.
After a bit of arm wrestling, we managed to buy the management company for 650 million rand, which was probably worth 550. But we took a view that we would overpay because it would open the door for us to get the assets. And we said at the time we're going to make a bid for the assets. We make a bid for the assets. A few months later, things are going well. There's talking to shareholders, and Norbert Sasser of Growthpoint comes out and announces an offer, which is 650 million rand more than ours. because he has a view that he doesn't have to pay us for the management company. But the Fountainhead board get an opinion and talk to lawyers, and they say, no, we have to entertain this. So we were quite annoyed because we thought they didn't. Go and talk to the Financial Services Board. They say, not our business. You go and sort it out. We don't make law. We just, but what is it? No ruling.
It was too complicated.
Too complicated for them to deal with.
Actually offer opinion.
So at the end of the day, Growthpoint were relying on a clause in which says that at all times the manager must act in the best interest of unit holders. Okay? They left out was the next wording, which is in the day-to-day administration of the fund. Our view was the sale of the whole portfolio is not day-to-day. Otherwise, why would we even charge fees? We should do it for nothing. So this was the whole thing going backwards and forwards, but the board were vacillating, and it was dragging on and on and on, and there was no resolution. So we were sitting here in this office one day with our advisors, Java, and we were talking. We said, why don't we go for, let's call it second price to start with, and acquire some shares? It was on a Thursday. We phoned a few of the bigger unit holders. Would you take high prop shares, which we had a lot of, for Fountainhead? We did swaps, got to 17 or 18% of Fountainhead, and then launched a limited offer on the Monday, saying we wanted to get about 25 or 26% of Fountainhead on this exchange ratio, first come, first served, and we were inundated. So we ended up with 37 or 38% of Fountainhead, and that killed the Growthpoint deal because they needed 75%.
So between you and I, what is your relationship like with Norbert Sasser now?
Seeing him for coffee on Monday morning.
There we go, because you talk a lot about relationships and how important it is when you are deal making.
At the time I was cross with Norbert, not because he made the offer, that's business, but when they started talking about our corporate governance was wrong and trying to do those things, I was a little bit annoyed, but I got
Did you make him aware that you were annoyed?
No, we weren't talking at that stage. The advisor said don't talk. But what I did do was our campaign need more space, less space, better space, which had been planned long in advance. And the better space was a falling down kennel with a bulldog. And the bulldog had a collar that said Butch, so I changed that to Norbert.
So you came back with an advertising campaign.
So that was a bit of fun, and I saw somebody phoned Norbert and said, well, what do you think of the ad? And he said, woof, woof. And it's fine. We talk, we're competitors, but we talk sometimes just about the market in general. And as I say, we're having coffee on Monday morning. So
many things that we could chat about and delve into in the current economic landscape, but I think that the pressing one, and one that you are well placed to answer, is the electricity challenge we are facing. What is your instinct on the electricity supply in South Africa? Where is it going to leave this country?
In dire straits, very dire straits. It's something which really annoys me, because when you hear the government's had since '98 until now to sort the problem out. Industry and business have cut power consumption by about 20%, but it doesn't. It's not enough. So we've got a break on our GDP. You can't go above 3% because we don't have the power. Okay, so we have issues in getting new developments up. Our shopping centres are shut down at times because of things that affects trading. A lot of things are impulse. You're not going to come back to buy the pair of shoes that you just felt like buying. So all of this is a break. And then when I hear our minister say this is because of the growth in the economy, I just want to go mad. I mean, it's really poor planning. I think the delays in the new power stations, all of these things, and we have a situation now where almost perfect storm. We've got the quantitative easing in Europe. We've got low inflation. This should be a boon for our exporters, but they can't take advantage of it because they don't know if they can produce timeously, because what's going to happen with power. And then if you want to add labor into the mix, well.
How are you mitigating against the risk for Redefine itself?
Look, a lot of our newer buildings have got generators, diesel generators, gas generators. We're going through an exercise right now to see what we can do in our shopping malls to keep them going, because UPS, keeping the shops open, does not work. You as a consumer are not going to walk into a dark shopping centre with mediocre lighting into a store that's only can keep their till and their credit card going, maybe a few lights. It's got to be normal or close.
Let's put an idiot's guide to deal making in the property space. You talk a lot about your instinct, you talk about relationships. If you were to put out the 5 top things in your experience when it comes to deal making, what would it be?
Okay, well, the first thing I think is you need parameters of what you want to buy. So if you have a parameter which says I'm not buying property, for example, talking property with a value of under 50 million or of a particular size, that immediately cuts down what you have to look at. So if it doesn't fit, don't even look at it.
So clearly defined parameters
So clearly
up front.
defined parameters. So once you know you've got the clearly defined parameters, you get offered something, you look at it and you decide, yes, this fits, I want to buy it. And then based on the information you then have, which is really quite scant, income, etc., I would be prepared to pay X. And set yourself a limit. So the top price I'm going to pay for this is that, and if I don't get it, walk away. Okay, because sometimes you get caught up in the hype of the deal and you end up overpaying. Then if you can, and it's not always possible, try and find out what does the seller, why is the seller, what's his motivation in selling it? Is he immigrating? Has he got a tax issue with it? Is it a restructure? What can you do? And if you can understand that, if you can sit face to face with the seller as opposed to sitting with a broker or an agent, you can establish a rapport, try and work out what it is and work around that. So
you need to eyeball the seller.
You need to eyeball if you can, and then do a deal that makes sense. So you're then going to do the deal, speed of execution. For us, and I think that's a big part of Redefine's success, we have very flat structures. So if somebody has a deal, they want to sell a property, they'll either talk to one of my guys in acquisitions, disposals, or me. They'll arrive at this office, we'll look at it, we'll say thanks, no thanks, yes, we're interested. I'll call my PA, give her a 2-page letter, this is the basis. You've got X amount of time to say yes or no. And I tell them up front, if you go and hawk this thing around, I'm sure you will do slightly better. If we're talking 100 million, maybe it's not going to be 120, it'll be 102, 103, but with a lot of conditions. We've got the money, we don't need board approval, we've got an investment committee at that level, we can transact, we can do the due diligence in a week, in 10 days, whatever it is, and you've got certainty.
How often has that time pressure resulted in a lost deal?
Very, very seldom. We try. And if, by the way, if you don't want to take the offer and walk around, be my guest. But if you come back, you're not getting the same price. So there's a stick and a carrot. And that speed of execution helps us. So for example, this transaction we did 2 days ago, the 4 billion Leaf Capital. Leaf Capital, for whatever reason, ideally wanted to sell their portfolio at the end of their financial year, 28th of February. We knew one of the guys, he came here in September, end of September. He said, look, we're going to sell this portfolio. We've got 2 or 3 guys interested. Can you guys execute? Yes. What yield? They wanted a lower yield. We said we can do this at an 8% yield. Okay? Okay, so we'll give you an exclusivity because they knew we can deliver. We got guys working through December. I never went on holiday. We did the due diligence. We signed it. It's done. They get paid.
I've chosen highlights of mine from the book. Is there anything that I've left out in our discussion that you think we need to mention before we wrap this up?
Oh, there's a lot, but I think for me, for somebody who wants to start a business or be an entrepreneur, if you have the passion, if you have the drive, and the dream, then do it. Because if you don't, you're going to end up working for somebody and help them fulfill their dream. So that's the one big thing, I think. And then, of course, there's always, and I know lots of people talk about it, it's family and it's balance. And for me, I'm not working for myself. I'm working to provide, to help my family, my kids, my grandkids, and striking that balance of not making work your everything. Because at the end of the day, you turn around and what is there? So those are key things for me.
So I'm going to end on a quote from the book, and that's really about the University of Life, going out there and starting a business, because if you do that, then the lawyers and accountants are ultimately going to work for you. I think that perfectly sums it up, Marc.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. I've been chatting to Marc Wainer, Executive Chairman of Redefine.